special transmission from Indus News Studios here in Lahore. We've got guests connected from all across the world talking about Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to Washington, D.C., the first such visit after he became leader. And he's met with President Trump. We showed you a little while earlier the comments that they made to the press conference. And we're also joined by a new guest, Mr. Albert Eisenberg, a geopolitical expert, Republican political strategist, who's joining us from Philadelphia. Welcome, Mr. Eisenberg. We'll quickly come to you. But first, Professor Adil, what we were talking about before we went on break was essentially how this might move forward in terms of not just the conversation that seemed to have skirted around what Pakistan's role in Afghanistan is expected to be, because let's face it, it almost seems from what we've seen in the past few days, the leverage that the US has in Afghanistan might be highly dependent on Pakistan and how it plays its role with the Taliban.
So on the Afghanistan issue, the question is the one that you've posed: how will this go forward, and what will happen? So I think the optics we've been getting have been good. We'll wait for the final outcome, but till now I think it's been better than has been expected on any side. So that is a good news. But now the question is next step, and the next step is not going to be taken by either Mr. Imran Khan or Mr. Donald Trump. It's going to be taken by their bureaucracies, it's going to be taken by their institutions, it's going to be taken by a lot of people, and most importantly, it's going to be taken in Afghanistan itself. My worry, as we have talked before, is that if too much of it depends on Pakistan, that does not bode well for the US or for Afghanistan or for Pakistan. Peace has to come from Afghanistan itself. Pakistan has to be able to do what it can. But if the US tries to think or constructs an idea that Pakistan is going to deliver this thing, that's just historically not going to happen. It hasn't happened for 2,000 years. The key players are the people of Afghanistan. And I hope that is the message that's been conveyed to Mr. Trump.
Okay,
I think if that clarity has been given, then the trip would have been itself worth it. And then, of course, the other big thing is the India question. As we were talking, I would like to find out what Mr. Modi's reaction to that is. Right now, the person I would like to hear from is neither Mr. Trump nor Mr. Khan.
You would like to hear what Prime Minister Modi has to say about being a mediator. Thank you so much, Professor Adil Najam there. Coming to you, Mr. Albert Eisenberg, tell me first, have you been watching this press conference between the two leaders?
Yes, it's been a classic show. Trump is a great showman, and the people, Pakistan love a show as well. So yeah, I've been watching. It's been entertaining. I'm excited to hear that Pakistan never lies. That's always reassuring from an ally. So yeah, I've been watching.
Yes, it comes at a time when just last year, President Trump had changed his South Asian strategy in which he essentially wanted even India to do more in Afghanistan, something that was a big concern to Pakistan. And here, as the two leaders meet, and one of the biggest issues that they're expected to get into the details of is counterterrorism and Pakistan's presence in Afghanistan and how that will help. What do you think how they're going to progress forward on that?
Well, you're absolutely right that we've been sort of trying to reset relationships all across the globe. And for like him or hate him, President Trump is not afraid to upset the status quo with what he says and what he does, whether it's from the Iran deal to moving the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. As far as the Pakistani relationship goes, as the last guest said, it's going to involve a lot of the bureaucracies, which is an endlessly frustrating situation for any Pakistani voter and any American voter, and has been a source of consternation both with Trump and the State Department establishment, the quote-unquote deep state, the lack of personnel at the State Department. So it's really going to rely on a lot of factors. And as far as Afghanistan, we have elections coming up in September, which is the same time that Secretary Pompeo said that we want to reach a new agreement. There's a lot tenuous. The Taliban on the Pakistani side as well as the Afghan side have outlasted many people and many parties and many conflicts before this. So with as much instability, though people may be excited in both establishments today, it'll be TBD as to whether anything will change.
If you don't. Well, but there's been a lot of talk about moving forward and going on, but Pakistan are still on this FATF list. It's a grey area list that they're on, and it's hurting them economically. It's hurting the economy, it's hurting them financially. I mean, how can they move forward while still being on this list? There was no mention of it in the press conference. Do you think surely this has to be on the agenda?
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, Pakistan is here for money. Pakistan is here for U.S. great weapons. We have the best foreign weaponry in the world. And whether or not they're announcing it, I'm sure both of, the comments have been vetted by both sides. So perhaps there's some face saving going on. Both countries want to project strength, but at the end of the day, the U.S. and the Western world is very reliant on Pakistan to either deliver on its crackdown with the Taliban and sheltering militants, terrorists, call them what you will, on their side. And Pakistan is in an extremely tenuous situation economically. They are watching the price of oil as much as anyone in the world as a net energy importer. Their IMF loans have not sat well with the Pakistani public. You know that better than I do. So certainly economics is in the first and forefront of one of several major topics that are all sort of intertwined.
Albert, thank you very much for your time there. I want to go now to Washington to Reena Shah. Reena, I wanted to ask you a particular question when it came to Pakistan, because they used to be the second largest recipient of US aid, which was clearly a positive development. Do you think they'll ever return to that trusted status with the United States?
I see today's interaction between President Trump and Prime Minister Khan to be one that was very amicable, and I think it certainly opened the door for a very good relationship to begin to form. But frankly, it's quite confusing to many of us sitting here watching and having formed the opinions that we have about Imran Khan from many years ago. I'm not really sure kind of what card he's playing right now, except that he seems to be something like Trump. He understands that people want to like him, people do like him, and he's sort of taking that and running with it. I don't know that he's very substantive and looking to go deeper into the issues right now. I think it's all about the relationship at this point, and I do see it getting better because they seem to enjoy their time together. There was a lot of sort of laughing and seeming like they were old friends. So I think it's a start to something, but it's hard to say much more than that.
Yeah, it seemed very jovial, didn't it? Very casual, like they've been talking for months on end. But obviously, this is Imran Khan's first visit to the White House. Do you think that this relationship is going to develop into a fruitful one?
For me, I'm not sure. Look, Trump is one who doesn't reveal himself all the time. I think he has people in his administration who are very concerned about a number of things, a plethora, really, of human rights to the relationship with India. These are all things for great concern, but I don't know that President Trump has much regard for those things. So in regards to their casual relationship, perhaps becoming people who communicate much more than expected, I don't know that it's going to lead to real progress for Pakistan, particularly. I think it might be a little bit of smoke and mirrors, frankly. So fruitfulness, not sure. No.
Okay, and here I'd like to also introduce the guest who's sitting here, Ms. Reena Shah, Mr. Lawrence Corby. You're a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and a senior advisor to the Center for Defense Information. What is your take on the kind of repertoire between these two, especially considering that there's something interesting that President Trump mentioned here, and as we were speaking to our previous guest, seems like the biggest statement that's come out of this press conference is that he's ready to be a mediator. He mentioned Prime Minister Modi of India had actually asked him. Now, considering Kashmir has always been a bilateral issue between the two countries in a really big, contentious, sticking point, how do you take this? Almost like, is this a possible incentive to Pakistan in a way?
Well, I think that the president hopes it would be. Our president, President Trump, puts a lot on personal relationships, whether it's with Vladimir Putin or Kim, the president, the leader of North Korea. And I think he thinks that talking to the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the head of India, he can get the relationship back. And I think it's significant that prior to his visit coming here, Prime Minister Imran Khan has arrested the person who was theoretically responsible for the horrible incidents at Mumbai. So I think he thinks he can make that happen. just as I think he thinks he can restore the Pakistan-U.S. relationship and lead to some sort of peace agreement with the Taliban.
All right. Stay with us there, Mr. Lawrence. Reena, let me welcome another guest who's just joining us. It's Air Vice Marshal, Mr. Shahzad Chaudhary. Welcome to this special transmission. As we saw the conversation between the two leaders in the presser, a lot of positive body language was seen. A lot of issues were talked about, especially trade. President Trump said, I'm looking forward to quadrupling it even. I mean, there seems to be almost, if one could interpret, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, a lot of incentives that President Trump is subtly showing towards what kind of cooperation from Pakistan, do you think?
I think President Trump is known for hyperbole. And what he suggests in his off-the-cuff remarks, for example, a press engagement like this, tends to be then subsequently refined by more bureaucratic interaction with states and between the bureaucracies. So I think that's one aspect of it. Secondly, what it does indicate is that the two sides, or the two leaders at least in person, have found a comfort level with each other. President Trump has an image of himself as a strong person, as a strong leader, and I think he respects strong leaders all over, regardless of what hue and color they come from. So he may have found one in Imran Khan as well, in terms of his person. So I think that has established a sort of a platform on which something can be built. But I think it's more important to see what are the real contexts of a relationship or a possible relationship in the coming days and coming months. Is there something that can unite the two nations in towards a more constructive strategic engagement? And if there is a possibility, and I don't know which one is it, but if there is a possibility that yes, then the two sides could possibly hope to move on and find some feet in the relationship. But if not, then it's quite possible that just a good rapport between the two might just sustain.
Okay, so much. Stay with us there, Air Vice Marshal Shahzad Chaudhary speaking to us. Coming back to you, Lieutenant General Mustafa, thank you for being so patient. I know you had a lot to say, especially about President Trump, going on about how he was ready to mediate. It almost seemed like he threw a line to Prime Minister Imran Khan. Do you want me to mediate? Imran Khan was like, yes, absolutely. What do you make of that?
I think it's just banter to start with. I won't push my store by what he said. Because when you talk of Kashmir, to start with, it was the United States of America which started the mediation process. Jack Owen's plans that came about, and India consistently defeated those efforts. And as of now, when you look at the American position in Afghanistan, and also how American wants India to be placed there. Right. That is what leads me to believe that number one, Trump will never come into it, even if Modi were to agree, because forcing India out of Kashmir or any kind of a solution to Kashmir is, as of now, I don't think so India is going to be ready. Modi is going to be ready, although Pakistan would welcome that. Mm-hmm. And
but why do you think he said it?
Oh, he can say whatever he likes to, and because he never lies.
Right, but here, Brigadier Imran, let me ask you this then. I mean, this is not just an isolated sort of conversation about U.S. and Pakistan. U.S. has got a lot going with India itself. They're not very happy with how they're dealing with the S-400 purchase from Russia.
Let me guess what Prime Minister Modi must have told or asked President Trump. He would have wanted Azad Jammu and Kashmir from Pakistan. And he would have wanted President Trump to come with a solution which gives him the Pakistan part of Kashmir as well. Otherwise, if that has not happened, then I think this is just a lot of hot air. Mm-hmm. And it can only be fructified if the State Department comes up with a proper plan. And they come up with a plan for all of them to get together, let's say at Camp David, and they actually start seriously addressing this issue.
Brigadier, you're talking about plans. I want to take it from Kashmir to Afghanistan, which was one of the main points of why Imran Khan was in America in the first place. And we talked earlier, it seems it's getting less clear where Pak-US relations stand. Will they strengthen, or will they weaken, or will they fall apart once the Afghan war is over? What do you think about this?
I'm quite clear in my mind. Pakistan and the United States do not have any strategic interests or any common strategic interests or any interests on which they converge strategically. I personally think that Afghanistan is a transactional task, job, or interest, and once it is over, that will be it. Because why does the US want to leave, or why does the President want to get out of Afghanistan? First of all, are the elections that he needs to win.
And it's been 18 years.
Yeah, it's been 18 years and $1 trillion and got absolutely nothing to show for.
Right.
And then they've all along been saying that we will never talk to the terrorists, and now they are actually dealing with them for the last 1 year or so. So it has been a lose-lose sort of activity for the UN, for the United States. And I think they just want to get out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
What they really want Pakistan to do is that through the Pakistan's military, they want to retain some sort of a control over Afghanistan.
Right.
They do not want Afghanistan to, descend back again into turmoil, into a hotbed of terrorism.
Yeah.
And they do not want, terrorism to again start flourishing from that place. And that, I think, is where Pakistan can help them.
Okay.
Or that is what they think that Pakistan ought to be doing.
Okay, just hold that thought very quickly. Coming back to you, last question, Air Vice Marshal Shahzad Chaudhary, about the way this will move forward, in your opinion. I know there's a lot being said about this is just for a horse and pony show. I mean, what really matters is how the bureaucracy sit down and pen out a plan for the future. What is your expectation?
Well, really, I think there is a possibility of Pakistan and the US keeping engaged because of the situation in the Gulf. That is a possibility, but how we frame that issue in terms of strategic interests or in the strategic context is going to be more important. Right. It will need some innovation in the sense that Pakistan does not want to get directly engaged in Iran and whatsoever, or a conflict in Iran. But can there be a quid pro quo, for example, for the US and its allies vis-a-vis Iran, where Pakistan could play a role, and then as a bargain, seek for a similar sort of a response in India from Kashmir, for example, or on Kashmir. Now, that's maybe for the two administrations or two strategic think tanks in the countries or the establishments, it may be a bit of a long hope to go for. But there is something that Pakistan will have to do to keep the U.S. Engaged in the region. I think otherwise, the U.S. is very keen on actually extricating itself, the word used by President Trump and very notably used by him, that he wants to extricate the earliest possible. And this extrication is the mindset that perhaps reflects their thinking. In that sort of a mindset, there is little that Pakistan, or for that matter, or Pakistan, the U.S. could hope for, other than just keeping good relations between them and hoping that the two leaders keep meeting whenever.
Thank you very much for your time. Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, I want to ask you, Trump said that Iran was the #1 terror state in the world now. Do you agree with this statement?
But first, let's talk about Afghanistan.
Of course.
Call me cynic or whatever, but I don't think so America is getting out of Afghanistan. One. If you recall, I think just about a month back when Trump declared that as we draw down in Afghanistan, we are not going to leave it totally like that. We're going to have a very, very strong intelligence presence there. Right. What does that mean? It could mean from the private contractors coming in a big way to anything else that you can think about. And that is where I think we need to concentrate. Because if we now all feel that America is getting out, then our thought process is going to be in a different frame. But if we realize that America is not getting out of Afghanistan, simply because being in Afghanistan helps America to deal with Iran, and whenever it likes to deal with Pakistan. And mind you, with all this bonhomie that we saw, Pakistan as the only nuclear state, Islamic nuclear state, doesn't sit well with the American plans thing as they are. And let's not forget that. I think in the heat of the moment, we seem to be all feeling very good about it. But coming on to the brass tacks, there are very serious things to be talked about. Yeah. And finally, when you talk of Iran, Iran also has a problem. The problem is that while they are engaged in Gulf against the American interest and the Middle Eastern interest, Iran also provides linkages to the Central Asian republics and beyond to Russia. And there is another route available for the Trump administration's competitors in the region, the China and Russia, to come into a place from where they can threaten American interests directly. And finally, before I end my argument, if America was to leave Afghanistan, this would actually mean American exit from this region.
And do you think they want to stay in the region?
Oh, no. They will never, ever do that. Because depending totally on India, as you just pointed out earlier, that India also has a baggage. It can't just run away from Russia, as they are.
Right.
They're a major arms supplier. So caught between that, I don't think so America is leaving Afghanistan. And I don't think so they're going to allow Iran a place where they can be like Pakistan, providing linkages into the region for Russia and for China.
Okay, let's ask from our guest from in the Washington, D.C. studios. Mr. Lawrence, do you agree with what Lieutenant General Mustafa is saying here, that essentially the U.S. isn't looking to cut or sever ties or their presence in Afghanistan? What they're looking for is maybe a proxy to be there so that they can have a stronghold of intelligence presence in the region.
Well, President Trump wants to end the war. Now, whether after the war is over, you take all the troops out, you're going to leave some special forces there. Obviously, we'll have diplomats. But the president, and he's supported by the majority of the American people, want to end that war because we're spending roughly about $50 billion a year on it, and we're still having brave Americans being killed. I think a more traditional president, like some of previous Republicans, would want to stay there to maintain some sort of influence. But remember, our relationship with Pakistan has been on and off, again, going back to the Cold War. We basically, when President Carter came in, we cut off our relations with them that had because of their human rights policies, because of the relations we had as a result of them helping us, the Nixon administration, to go to China. Then when the Soviets went into Afghanistan, we reestablished relations. Then when they got the nuclear weapon, we took them off again. After 9/11, we went back again. So we've had this roller coaster with Pakistan over the years. And President Trump, when he came in, seemed to want to cut it off. He cut off the aid, and he said that they're not helping us much in the war. Now he seems to think we have to work with them again because they're the key to getting negotiations going between the Taliban and the Afghan government. So it's been on and off, and it reminds me of what Bismarck said, you know, nations don't have permanent friends or enemies, they have permanent interests.
Right, and Ms. Reena Shah, you're sitting there right next to him. Do you agree with this approach? I mean, one could obviously see the trend that every time Pakistan is needed for a U.S. agenda, for a goal in the region that Pakistan is in, the relationship gets really good. So what is to guarantee that once this withdrawal takes place, that the relationship between the two won't go bad again?
You know, there is no guarantee, and I think that's because of Trump entirely, because he's really rather new to governing, right, altogether. Whether you look at domestic affairs or international affairs, he tends to always want to do things differently. And I think he's actually quite a simple man. He's driven by his own personal interest, and he's somebody that is drawn to people that are like him. I think he finds Imran Khan to be quite charismatic, somebody who's sort of a bit of a celebrity persona, and he likes that. He's drawn to that. So he's willing to revisit this entire relationship because he sees the opportunity to have a group of very popular leaders that he can sort of form on his own that are not our traditional allies in the U.S. And so what we're seeing in this moment is Trump playing the long game which he typically tends to not do. He does the short-sighted measures that often get him in trouble because they're knee-jerk reactions to something that's happened. But I think he again sees Imran Khan as somebody he could call a friend many years from now, and sees him as somebody that is sort of palatable to be seen with and exciting. And look, let's not forget the kind of rally that Imran Khan held in Washington, D.C. just yesterday. It was very Trump-esque, if you ask me. I know a number of people who were there and who really love Imran Khan. So I think Trump's affinity for Imran Khan is entirely because he sees some of himself in him. So the long game is to just say, let's form a relationship, let's go slow.
Right.
Meanwhile, his advisors are saying, let's do something realistic and substantive.
Okay. Brigadier, do you agree with what the Lieutenant General said about America trying to keep a presence there, but saying they want to stop the war in Afghanistan?
I can actually say a lot in support of what General Mustafa has said. You see, if you see Afghanistan on the map, Afghanistan is the central position which touches Western Asia, Southern Asia, and Central Asia. Any power sitting in Afghanistan has a direct oversight over all three Asias, one. Number two, geopolitically, it stops Russia and, ominously, Shanghai Cooperation Organization from acquiring a military and an economic dimension. And if they move up to the Makran coast, then that will have enormous strategic connotations. That is geopolitically.
You have to simplify that for everybody at home.
All right, I'll do that. You see, all right. China has already made an ingress into Pakistan.
Yes.
Right.
And through the CPEC and the BRI. And because of that ingress, it has now got a foothold into the Southern Asian region as well.
Right.
Russia is becoming more and more cozy with Pakistan. And it will also, inshallah, get involved into the gas pipelines and into the steel mills, perhaps, or the mineral development, and get involved in the CPEC, and then also get an ingress here. China and Russia form the bulk or the nucleus of this Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Okay.
Bring China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, and Turkey together, and you have a pole out there to compete with the American pole. Right. The Americans would be very careful if they leave Afghanistan. Now come to the geo-economic part of it. You sit in Afghanistan, you dominate Iran and its fossil fuels, Central Asia and its fossil fuels, the mineral reserves of Afghanistan, the mineral reserves of Balochistan, CPEC, BRI.
Right.
Then all the trade corridors which move north to south and east to west. All oil gas pipelines moving from the Middle East to China.
Okay.
And east to west from Turkmenistan to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and to India. So this is such a key position in this region that Americans just cannot afford to leave this place. And just remember one thing. They move out of Afghanistan. From Syria to the Philippines, they have no place to put their foot on.
Right.
Except for the few monarchies in the Arabian Peninsula.
I hear what you're saying here, Brigadier Imran, but Lieutenant General Mustafa, let me ask you this. While this might be a very valid reason for the U.S. to want to stay in Afghanistan, but let's also look at it from the perspective of what has been happening to the U.S. in terms of their relationships with countries across the board. I mean, like, we're seeing how tensions are flaring with Iran. We've seen how they've been treating Kim Jong-un on North Korea. They've taken on China for way too long. I mean, it's hurting both economies. It almost seems, and even Europe now, it almost seems there is a shift towards how the world sees U.S.'s role in global politics.
That may be so, because like they say in Urdu, har aruje raz wale, it had to come at some point in time. The American influence over the world is on the decline. The Americans don't know
General, I asked
yet.
him to simplify. You have to translate that now.
I mean, everything which has achieved its maximum peak, thereafter it's only downhill. And that is what is to happen to every empire that you see historically.
So you're saying the U.S. has reached its apex?
I think that U.S. as yet doesn't know it, but it's on the decline. You look at its influence in this region alone. About 20 years back, nobody could even think of Pakistan telling U.S., okay, sorry, we won't do this because this is what is not in our interest. Now Pakistan can't do that. You couldn't think of Iran standing up to US the way it has stood up to it right now. You couldn't think the US and everybody combined go into Syria and they could not take control of Syria. I mean, when you look at all this and you find that US had to rely on proxies like ISIS, they had to rely on proxies like Indian provided places. I think the US doesn't realize it. And as it thinks, the things are evolving and the power blocks that are evolving. Normally, when we sit down and we say that no, the world should have peace and that is where we should have trade and we should have economic development, well, that's all fine. But when you cut down the chairs, it actually is in competition. And there is a competition between different powers and they want to excel each other, they want to dominate each other. That has been happening over the centuries, happening right now, and this is the century of Asia.
Okay,
and
let's continue this conversation after the break. Ms. General, if that's okay with you, I apologize. My producer is saying we need a break, so we need a break. Stay with us. We're talking about Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan in the United States meeting Donald J. Trump. And we have our guests here, Brigadier Imran Malik Saab and Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa. We'll be back after this break. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You're watching a special transmission of Indus News covering Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Trump, a meeting that's just taken place. We've seen both of them conversing with the press. And here, our guests in Washington, D.C., Mr. Lawrence and Ms. Reena Shah, been sharing their insight into an evolving relationship that has been U.S. and Pakistan at best up and down. And now what we're seeing is, after a strained relationship between the two in the past year, maybe turning towards a positive side. I want to come to you here, Ms. Reena, and try and get your take on what, in terms of the global perspective towards the US as not just the biggest economy, but also having quite a sway in terms of threatening with sanctions or any other punitive measures on countries. I mean, do you feel that there's a time now, the time has come now, where this is on the decline of US's dominance in the region and around the world?
I think we're sitting here in a very incredible moment. That incredible moment is that the U.S. is really, because of the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, taken a great deal of liking to Saudi Arabia and is almost sort of instructed in many ways by Saudi Arabia in this moment. I think our president has no concern about what that's going to mean years from now. I think he's very much in the moment and not really caring what folks on the global stage think of us, rather. So that lack of care, that sort of lack of concern for how we operate, how we do things, disrupting the traditional channels of diplomacy. This is what we're talking about, this incredible moment where we have a president who is open to doing things completely different and thus leaving us really vulnerable to how we operate in this sort of new world order we are creating for ourselves. So if you ask me what that means for Pakistan, I don't think that means anything right now, actually. I think this is all a lot of show. I think that, like I said earlier, Trump is just not too concerned. I think he finds Imran Khan to be a gentle, charismatic guy and sort of wants to see about keeping him as a friend. The other things that are happening that are quite significant, whether you talk militarily or really on the ground, things that are happening in Balochistan, these things don't matter to Trump. Whether his advisors knock him on the head with a book of these things, it does not matter. After this visit, what's going to happen is that Trump is going to sort of say, well, Pakistan's in my corner. Imran Khan likes me. I think we'll be okay. Let's move forward and keep things moving in the way in which they've been happening, which is to continue to disrupt by going through the Middle East and going through the way that Saudi Arabia wants us to go. I think it's a very sad moment for those of us who worked in Republican politics for a very long time, because there's just no expectation that we will ever regain our status on the world stage. So this has very little to do with sort of the long-term relationship and more to do with how our president operates and will maybe continue to operate in the next 4 years if he's reelected.
Right, I hear you there, Ms. Reena Shah, but at the same time, Mr. Lawrence, it does pose the question here that where is the strategy now? Now, I understand how his party might not see Pakistan as that big a strategic player, or as Ms. Reena said, that it's time to move forward. I've got Imran Khan on my corner. What's next? It's just that he's got his fingers in so many pies in terms of what's happening in his role in Syria, what's happening in Iran, and how things are going with China. How do you see this development? Do you feel like there is no strategy, or there's a particular order to all of this?
No, that's the problem. There is no strategy. The president is acting on impulse. You know, I think it was very significant when he went to North Korea to meet Chairman Kim. He didn't even take John Bolton, his national security advisor. He took his daughter and son-in-law, and John Bolton was in Mongolia. Well, this is the person who's supposed to help you develop a strategy toward North Korea. He wasn't even there. And the same thing with Iran. He wants to get them back to the negotiating table. He's put a whole bunch of forces in there, and you increase the probability that you could have an armed conflict, but he doesn't seem to know how he wants it to play out. We know he ordered a retaliatory strike toward Iran after they shot down the American drone, and the planes were about to take off, and he changed his mind. Yeah. And because he said it might kill 150 people. So if he was really concerned about, you know, the people in Iran, he wouldn't keep these harsh sanctions on there, which are really causing them all kinds of problems. So I think that's the strategy. It's an all impulse. And I think that's why I mentioned earlier, he likes Prime Minister, Mr. Khan, because he's like him. He tweets. And so we can talk to him. And the same thing, he says wonderful things about Vladimir Putin, whereas he criticizes people like the head of the United Kingdom, Theresa May, and Angela Merkel from Germany, who are our traditional allies.
Lawrence, you mentioned earlier about US troops in Afghanistan. At last count, I think there was like 8,400 participating with NATO, and I think it brings the total to about 13,000. Mostly their job is now to train Afghanis troops when it comes to security. Now, we mentioned earlier that there was no strategy, but is there even a time frame to get these soldiers back home?
Well, he would like to do it certainly before his election, because he campaigned on saying that the war in Iraq was a mistake. Afghanistan has gone on too long. You may remember that he wanted to withdraw from Syria, and his Secretary of Defense resigned, so he kept a few troops there. The question becomes, you take out all 14,000? Have you consulted with our NATO allies who also have troops there? What kind of presence will you leave to ensure that the Afghan government continues to develop its military capability? No, he just wants to get out and say, well, look, I got elected, I ended the war, and I worked with Pakistan. I think that's the key, that Pakistan has helped get these negotiations going, and I think that's why he has forgotten all of the things he said about Pakistan a couple of months ago about talking about bin Laden. They hid bin Laden, so I'm going to cut off their money. Well, that was several years ago.
Lawrence Korb, Reena Shah in our Washington studios, thank you so much for joining us and your wonderful insight and your analysis. Thanks again. Now, Brigadier, you heard Lawrence earlier on saying, look, they just want to get out. Now, if they just get out, Afghanistan's going to be left in chaos again, surely, sure. No?
Yeah. Yes, I think we've already discussed this earlier on. Also, the US must have a plan to get out of Afghanistan.
But no plan.
There is no plan. Then they must at least create a strategic environment which is self-sustainable, which can be sustained by the Afghans themselves.
But do you think Pakistan is part of that plan?
Right. This is what they want the Pakistan military to do. They want to extricate themselves and then hand over the responsibility to the Pakistan military as well as to the Pakistan intelligence. Right. But they are forgetting one very serious issue. The moment the Americans leave Afghanistan, they will create a vacuum there. Right. And then there will be a mad rush from countries around Afghanistan to fill that vacuum. China, Russia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, at least these four countries will immediately move in to secure their own national interests.
To try to take
Right.
resources.
And-
Resources,
but
they have
besides
their
the
own interests there in Afghanistan.
Right.
Pakistan, for example, would have an interest with the Afghan Taliban, for example, or for the government in Kabul.
Okay.
China would be interested in the minerals there.
Yeah.
Russia again.
Yeah.
Iran
Alaska,
would
yeah.
have
Right, but,
a sectarian
so-
interest, perhaps.
Lieutenant General Mustafa, now while he's mentioning here that there would be a vacuum, let's also not forget something, an interesting fact that Mr. Lawrence mentioned, that pulling out the US soldiers for President Trump would save $50 billion. Right? That's a lot of money to save.
And he's all about money.
And he's all about money, of course. But then that essentially means wanting Pakistan in the realm of things would mean that cost falls on somebody. Can we afford to be in that position?
Pakistan.
I think Pakistan has learned this lesson the very hard way. I recall Trump's nemesis, Hillary Clinton, giving her views that having left Pakistan, having left Afghanistan like that was way back in the 90s, we put Pakistan in the spot. And Pakistan, having suffered for all these years and suffered economically and otherwise, I don't think so Pakistan can or should take this responsibility. Having said that, I think when you talk about the Americans spending so much of money, they are making it double that from Afghanistan itself. For them, it's a business again. They are not spending all the money for themselves. They are making money from Afghanistan and spending it there. And they have allowed a different kind of culture to develop in Afghanistan. There is a warlordism. There is this drug trade. Who is doing that? Where is that drug going?
I mean,
Who is earning that?
I remember reading that the first thing that the American soldiers did was secure the poppy fields.
Of course, this is what I'm saying.
Why would they do that?
So it brings into question, like at the height of this war, the past 18 years, there were 100,000 US troops on the ground. And then to say you still couldn't get hold of the problem and now you're dumping it on Pakistan and you want them to bring more to the table, it really, really highlights the trust deficit that we've been talking about that exists between the two countries.
Also the fact that every time we talk about American withdrawal from this region, we are talking about, in fact, an exodus kind of a situation. That is not tolerable either by Afghanistan, or to Pakistan, or to Iran, or anybody else. And when Trump talks of Iran, they forget one thing, and we also forget that. If anybody in any country which can upset this apple cart, Iran, and that can do it within a week, let's not forget that. That's the kind of influence Iran has now in Afghanistan, not only in the erstwhile Northern Alliance but also on the Taliban. So therefore, Afghanistan situation, we are in for a long haul. Let's not get overly excited that it's going to be sorted out soon. And let's not get excited that Trump is going to pull out all his troops. He might like to show that he has done it, draw down a bit, and he has already done that kind of a thing. But he has brought in the private contractors all there.
Right.
And there will be some more of that kind again when he says that he wants to have a very strong intelligence presence there. In what form? That is a question which begs answering.
You know, you say don't get excited, and I think you have a point there because there's been some broken promises from America when it comes to Pakistan as well. You've got more than 1 million internal refugees in Pakistan from Afghanistan. There was supposed to be financial support for them. It didn't appear.
It didn't appear.
Right.
There was these US reconstruction opportunity zones. Didn't appear. The funding didn't appear.
There's a lot that Americans didn't do and what they promised.
I think what should define Pakistan and US relationships vis-a-vis Afghanistan is that these relationships should be done on a basis of quid pro quo. If they want Pakistan to do something for them, then they must pay for it.
But here's the problem, Brigadier Imran, that if quid pro quo works really well, if there isn't a threat like India, because whatever US decides and however it decides to treat Pakistan, there is that vacuum that you were talking about in Afghanistan, it'll always be a problem for us because of India's presence there.
Right. If India comes into Afghanistan, let me assure you one thing. India will come to Afghanistan by its own volition.
Well, they're already there, no?
It will leave only when Pakistan allows it to leave. They know it, and they will never put their boots on
You're talking about the physical presence, but they've already spent over $6 billion in Afghanistan. Yeah. And that kind of money doesn't go in unless you have something much more to gain from there. And as I hear, they've already secured rights to a lot of iron ore mines, coal mines.
Haji
and why not? I mean, and why not? Because if you look at the history between Afghanistan and Pakistan, that has been checkered at best. Peaceful time is very, very limited. And every time there has been trouble between Afghanistan and Pakistan, initiated by Afghanistan and prodded by India. How would Pakistan tolerate Indian presence in Afghanistan in any form?
So not only have we got the American issue, the Afghanistan issue, we've also got the Indian issue. So
of course.
It's a difficult situation.
And it's a situation that is evolving at a time where Pakistan isn't losing that much, one would say, because let's face it, CPEC has made a huge dent in terms of how the US sees us dependent on them.
You see, what is likely to happen is that if the US does move out, and if there is a vacuum, I personally think that China will be the first country to move in, one, for the minerals. Number two, it will incorporate Afghanistan into the CPEC. And just imagine if the BRI and the CPEC are conjoined with the Eurasian Economic Union of Russia.
Right.
And together, they will make one such economic bloc which will challenge the West, the US-led West, dollar for dollar. That is why I said when the Shanghai Cooperation Organization acquires a military dimension and an economic dimension, along with this political dimension, and moves its sphere of influence to include the Makran Coast, just imagine
it's ambitious.
The strategic connotations.
Yeah.
That is why I still believe, and I agree with the general straight away, that it is quite impossible for the Americans to leave this
to leave Afghanistan and to ignore Pakistan, and why this meeting
and not leave Pakistan also.
Right, so it holds a lot of significance. Well, we've come to the point of the show where we bid all our guests goodbye. Thank you so much, Brigadier Imran. I can see you're ready to leave.
In a good way, of course.
Lieutenant General Mustafa here in the Lahore studios, thank you so much for giving us your time. And in Washington, D.C., Mr. Lawrence and Ms. Reena Shah for taking out the time to speak to us. And of course, in our Islamabad studios, we had Dr. Rasul Baksh Rice a little earlier, and Professor Adil Najam also joining us from Boston. Like I said, from so many various parts of the world, giving us an insight into how this meeting might ring out for both the countries. Prime Minister Imran Khan met with the President, the US President Donald Trump. We'd also like to thank here our wonderful Indus team who has really taken out a lot of effort and time in making this incredible transmission possible.
Absolutely.
And with that, we've come to the end of the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Next time, good night.
All the best. Bye-bye.